In 43 AD, the Romans invaded Britain, along with 40,000 men and a load of elephants, all packed into 1,000 ships. They landed down the road at Richborough here in Kent, but immediately after that, no one's really sure what happened, mainly because no Roman forts have ever been found here in southeast England. That is, maybe until now, because archaeologist Paul Wilkinson has got a theory that this hilltop at Sindale may be the site of the first Roman fort ever built in Britain. He's invited Time Team to use their expertise and experience to test his theory, and we're going to need every minute of our 3 days to do it. To me, this looks like the perfect place to build a fort. You've got a great vantage point all the way around Kent. Perfect place for your sentries to be, but what do I know? The person that we really need to talk to is Paul. Paul, why do you think there's a fort here?
Well, because I've dug a trench through here, and underneath the turf we've got a very, very nice Roman ditch. And right at the bottom of that ditch was, in fact, Claudian pottery.
This is the first trench that you dug?
Exactly where you're standing now.
Well, graphics have done me the kind of map that I'd understand here.
Yes, we're just stood on this trench here, and behind us is the other trench we dug, and by joining up the profiles of those, we could actually see exactly where the Roman ditch ran, and we did exactly the same thing on the east side.
Yeah, but two ditches doesn't make a fort, does it? Why are you so convinced that there might have been a fort here?
Location. You know, 43 AD, the Roman army landed at Richborough, marched along the North Kent coast, and it's exactly a day's march to Sindale, where we're standing now. And the Roman fleet would have used the best anchorage along the coast, which in fact is just downhill from here.
So this could be the place that they very first camped after they arrived in Britain?
This is the first overnight stop of that Roman invasion army.
It would be fantastic if we found it, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd be a real big story for British archaeology.
It'd be wonderful.
Over recent years, Paul's been excavating a 3rd to 4th century Roman town nearby, but he's never had the resources to properly test his ideas about this hill, so understandably this is the start of a big 3 days for him. The prospect of finding evidence connected with one of the biggest events in British history has got Victor fired up too. And possibly even carried away. But it's this huddle of Time Team archaeologists who are here to test Paul's theory.
This is the only one that's got actually Claudian pottery from it, isn't this V-shaped one? That looks...
The case for a Roman fort is very much still to be proved, and knowing this lot, they'll take some convincing.
The key thing is how long it took them here, for how much trouble they had, because Dio does tell us there was a lot of guerrilla warfare going on here. The Britons retreating into what he calls swamps and forests. Now, does he mean round here? Does he mean further west? So we don't know whether they got here in a couple of days or whether it took a couple of weeks.
So what do they think of our chances of finding the first Roman fort built in Britain?
No, it's a really exciting idea. I love the idea of finding an early Roman fort, perhaps the first one in that whole Roman conquest, but it's going to be incredibly difficult to pick out. It's a 360-year period of history, and we're talking about a place that might have been occupied for just a few weeks, 1 year, maybe a couple of years at the outside. Really tough.
So already he's starting to rubbish the idea of the first Roman fort.
Yes,
what about a Roman fort, though? Can we find that?
Oh, definitely, because there's some key forensic tests we can apply to the archaeology, if you like, to show whether it's a fort or whether it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, what are the diagnostic traits? First of all, a fort has defences, so it's going to have a rampart around all 4 sides of earth, and outside that, double ditches, 1 ditch, another ditch outside that. In each side, there'll be a gateway, timber gateway built with big, massive timber posts. In each corner, there'll be a tower rising out of the rampart to give views to the outside. And finally, dating. It's going to be crucial to actually pin down the date of this thing, because we're looking at 10 years in time. So we want pottery, we want the Samian pottery, because this is very, very easily datable. This will help to pin it down even better. Some bits of Roman armour, bits of military equipment. If we get that, then we've cracked it.
Well, they don't want much, do they? But to my surprise, their master plan at the moment is to do nothing. That is until Geophysics have surveyed the area where Paul found the clearest evidence for a Roman military ditch. The hope is that Geophys will not only detect any other Roman ditches, but show us if the two bits Paul found join up. This would in fact reveal the shape of the fort. Phil explains to the diggers that there's going to be a bit of a wait, but maybe not, because Stuart has a plan of his own. This one, which is asked graphics to fit to the scale of the modern map of the site. Hello, Stu.
Hi, Tony, can you see where I am under the big tree to your left?
Stuart's interested in this big earthwork bank that's always been thought to be part of some fancy gardens that went with a grand house that was here in the 18th century.
We've actually got a plan here of the 18th century gardens. This is dated 1760 and we've put it to the same scale. And if I overlay it, can you see, that's the road at the top, that's where the house is there. Can you see the symmetry of the gardens that go with the house?
Yeah.
It's nowhere near
It's not,
this
is it?
earthwork here, and it's on a totally different alignment as well.
So even though they were right in saying that this was an old garden, they may have used something that was here before and stuck that on top.
That's what I'm wondering. I think it's such an obvious earthwork and the shape and form of it. We've got to have a look at it. Even if it is a later feature, what's it hiding? Is it hiding any aspect of an earlier landscape?
Phil, come over here, mate.
So, a change of plan.
We're going to get a trench in.
Oh, what?
Stuart's given us a target to dig that's not dependent on Geophys.
Good evaluation trench. Down the scarp, out here, 20 metres long.
It's going to be our first test of the site, to cut through the bank to see if there's anything underneath.
It's that first hole, isn't it?
And it's going to be a long trench to see if we can find a continuation of the Roman ditch Paul discovered. So the process of testing the theory that there is a Roman fort here has well and truly begun.
Maybe take a shade more off, but we're getting close,
Oh,
aren't we?
now then.
Ah.
Now then. That's a bit more like it, isn't it?
That looks to me, that's Roman, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the incident room, the evidence Paul found is under close scrutiny by Roman fort expert Tony Wilmot.
You've got a nice crisp V-shaped profile. You've just got the beginnings of the little square-cut ankle breaker at the bottom. But the eye's really drawn by the fact that somebody's been keen and scored these lines into the section and scored the interpretation into the section.
That's a digger, not a Roman.
Of course, it does slightly draw your eye. And another photograph which goes a bit deeper, you can see that there's a little bit of the ditch which hasn't been scored below it. There's a straight line.
The expert's opinion is that Paul's Roman ditch is even more convincing than the way it was originally interpreted. The only Roman military ditch I'm aware of is this one, as depicted on my idiot's guide, with a steep side where the attacker falls in, and a shallower side, the only way out into the line of fire. But there are 3 different types, and it's the middle one here that fits best with what Paul's found.
So you reckon we've definitely got a military ditch on the west?
Well, it's a very, very, very good candidate. Very good indeed.
Is it one of the double ditches belonging to a Roman fort like this? What we need is a Geophys plan of the ditches, and it looks like we won't have to wait too long now.
Ah, they're Roman, all right. Now, the question is dating. This looks like Belgic grog tampered-ware. It could be any time between the late Iron Age and about 100 plus AD.
Just slow down a minute. Belgic grog.
Tempered, yes.
So what does that mean?
It means the pottery, it's both handmade and wheel-turned. It's fired black. It contains the grog, in this context, is not rum. It's pre-fired clay, ground-up clay, mixed as a filler with the clay of the pot itself.
You want experts?
Yes.
This is the expert's expert.
Phil's just got a rim.
Ah,
Tony?
right.
Yeah. Now look, that looks a bit more diagnostic.
Now, I'd like to get this cleaned up. This looks awfully like it's from a biconical beaker in Upchurch Ware, which should date from about the year of the conquest through to 100 to 130 AD. Quite a nice diagnostic piece.
So maybe what we've got is a bit of mixed up earlier pottery
Yes.
with some
Yes.
later pottery, which is
Yes.
guess what you expect, 'cause this is the first layer we've got to.
Yes.
So if we keep going, Phil,
Good stuff. And now at last we're going to get to see the much-awaited Geophys results. And their first survey contains good, bad and very bad news. The good news is that they've detected these clear features. The bad news is that they're relatively modern, this one being a recent field boundary. We know this because it's in the wrong position to be the ditch Paul found, that's here. The very bad news is that Geophys can't see Paul's ditch or any other Roman ditches that might be here.
We need to do a lot more work, but I suspect you're not going to want to wait for us.
Neil, I've heard of anticlimaxes, but we've been waiting for 2/3 of a day to get information which would allow us to find out whether this was the first Roman fort in Britain. And we've got one black blob that he's not all that keen that we should put a trench in anyway.
Sure. I think it's time for Plan B, don't you?
It sounds like it, which might be.
Well, we said there was a series of checklists, didn't we, the things we wanted to find. So why don't we try and attack that? And it seems to me maybe the best place to go is round to the front of the fort, nearest to where Watling Street is.
The M1 of Roman roads, Watling Street, actually cuts across the edge of our site.
It looks as if Watling Street actually goes over this earthwork as a physical relationship, suggesting that the Watling Street is later than this earthwork. What date is the Watling Street on?
We've got pottery from the lowest levels of AD 50-ish.
So that would, if that's correct, that would suggest that this earthwork is earlier than AD 50-ish.
So it's either very early Roman or it's pre-Roman. And if we can nail that down, that's a start, isn't it?
So, test number 2. We're opening up our second trench here where the big earthwork bank turns. We want to know if this could be the corner of a fort and how the earthwork itself relates to Watling Street. Deeply buried archaeology, difficult geology, whatever the reasons for Geophys not working, the fact is that without a plan showing where the ditches are, our task has become that much harder. But not impossible, because we have Stuart's expertise to fall back on. His suggestion to position Trench 1 here has revealed a completely new ditch that was hidden by the earthwork bank. Where is it?
Well, I'm standing on it. You can see the yellow natural there and the yellow natural behind us.
All right, you need an expert eye to see it at the moment, but this ditch is about 15 metres away from the one Paul discovered that should show up somewhere about here in Trench 1. Digging was very much part of daily life for a Roman soldier.
I've come to give you a bit of a hand with the digging.
Oh, good Lord.
Sorry I'm a bit late.
Roman soldiers had to dig defensive ditches in pretty much full armour in hostile territory.
That can come off as well, can it? Thank the Lord for that.
Phil's enlisting in the Ermine Street Guard for the day to find out what it was like.
This is a funny old tool, isn't it? Is this as near as you can get to a Roman spade?
It's the nearest we've found, as far as I'm aware.
It's definitely a digging tool. I mean, you see, you can dig with it, and in this nice brick earth, it's a good tool to use.
Yeah.
But where you're in problem is if you've got to try and shovel with it, like that.
Yeah.
And that's where I would miss a decent shovel. You can't get down there, and it's a poor design. I'd have said it's a poor design.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure Phil would approve, but over in Trench 2, we've got what we think is our first coin, resting on a shovel, ready for Guy to see.
Look, Guy, I think we've got a little coin. It's come out the spoil heap, found by the metal detectorist.
Right, the key thing is the size. That takes us
Ooh,
straight...
but look, you can see, it's quite clear, isn't it? The legend's quite clear.
Let me just see if I can get that up. You're right, it's definitely 4th century now, because I can see that little victory on the back and the mint mark round the edge. It's in the middle to 3rd quarter of the 4th century. So
It is in fact 300 years after the invasion. What we're looking for is signs of 1st century occupation, ideally military finds, although not the bits dropped by Phil.
So is that how military equipment gets lost?
That's exactly how it gets lost. Yeah, it's just spun round on the pin and slipped off.
It's a really cold day, but this exercise has got Phil thinking, and not just about where the wind's blowing.
I mean, the other thing that I've been aware of since I've been digging here, and something you just never see on a site nowadays, is all the hobnail marks. And I mean, it must have been something which was always there on a Roman site. If you had Roman military building anything, you'd have hobnails. I mean, I thought it would be a bit more, I don't know, uncomfortable to work with all this armour on. I mean, it is a bit like trying to shovel or dig in a straitjacket. Yeah. But actually, there's actually not too bad at all. Yeah, there is a bit of sort of chafe in there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I have warmed up a bit.
I'm glad you have.
Just a few hours ago, Neil said to me, don't worry about this trench, it won't take up much time or labour, we'll just use the JCB, whip up the topsoil, and almost immediately we'll come down on fines. Now look at the depth and the length of this thing. Neil, you've gone stir crazy.
It hasn't quite gone according to plan, Tony. We thought we'd go through this topsoil and that this was the natural subsoil, but Kerry's been digging into it. I mean, it feels like natural. It looks like natural, but it's got Roman pottery in it, which means this is Roman infill down at this depth. Malcolm, what do you think of the pottery?
Well, let's have a look. Now this is Samian. This is a very eroded Samian, it's lost its surface. It's from a Dragendorf 36 dish, post 70 AD.
Post 70 AD?
Yes. This piece, this is an inverted rim cooking pot, very heavily averted, probably 3rd century.
Third century?
Yes, probably 3rd century. This is from the carinated girth of a biconical.
Not the carinated girth of a
carinated girth of a biconical.
You've got to say, this is probably the first time that our viewers will ever have seen a corrugated girth of a biconical.
Yes, it's
so what you're saying...
What sort of year is that?
Between 43 and 130.
So what you're saying is that this deposit down here is 150 years later than our putative Roman fort?
Could be.
So we've got to get down another 150 years of topsoil before we get on the what we're looking for.
I think so. I think what's happened, Tony, is that all this brown stuff, which has got Roman pottery in it, I think this is actually to do with the 18th century park. What they've done is actually move large amounts of earth about to make a flat parkland landscape.
And making it all the more difficult for us. But at least now we know the Roman archaeology is buried at different depths across this site. Which is why we're wasting no time opening Trench 3, because as well as locating Paul's Roman ditch in Trench 1, we want to see if it also continues in this direction. It's been a long, cold, frustrating day. We've shifted an awful lot of dirt, and I think we started to think we were never going to find anything decent. But now things are looking up, aren't they?
No, we haven't quite turned the corner yet, but this is a brilliant find because it's one of the key things that we need to pin it down to the invasion. The coin of Claudius. Claudius, that's the 4th emperor of Rome, the doddering half-wit put in place by the soldiers on his invasion to Britain to prove his whole position, to show that he's a great emperor. Here we go, you see the name really clearly there, Claudius. Great thing is the coin's not very worn. Despite the corrosion, that means it's been lost fairly early in its life.
Dan, where did the coin come from?
That coin came from about 3 inches below this marker that we've put in here, right on the top of the lowest piece of material in the ditch. So we've still got a fair way to go to get right to the bottom, but it's looking good.
So maybe that lower fill is actually going to have the Claudian pottery to go with that coin that we've been looking for all day.
So you think we could find this fort?
This is a great start, it really is.
Earlier today, the graphics people gave me this idiot's guide to what you need to find a fort. Samian pottery, corner towers, military finds, a gateway, double dishes. Join us after the break when I'm betting that we'll get decent archaeological evidence that right here we've got a Roman fort just like that. Beginning of day 2 in our search for the first Roman fort ever found in Britain. I got really excited yesterday because down here we found a ditch, and in it there was a very early Roman coin of the Emperor Claudius. Hopefully we'll get lots more goodies in there later on. But puzzlingly, we didn't find a ditch here which would line up with the ditch that archaeologist Paul Wilkinson found over there last year, which got him thinking there was a fort here in the first place. So where is that ditch? We think maybe we're not down deep enough yet, and the big quest today is to get on down. Which is going to be easier said than done. It's difficult enough to see each other, let alone the archaeology.
Right. So we're going to find a Roman fort in here today?
We're testing a theory that there was once a Roman fort here, but struggling without any guidance from Geophysics, whose results so far have been foggy too. At the moment, they can't explain why they're not able to detect the Roman ditches that we know exist on this site. So we're looking for any other clues that might help us. The idea that there was a fort here isn't a new one. Back in the 1800s, various antiquarians thought the Roman army had been here.
This is in 1874, and it says, although the Roman camp's known more by tradition than by remains actually existing today, it's still traceable round the garden and the stable yard.
Paul Wilkinson's theory is influenced by the fact that over the last few years he's been excavating a 3rd to 4th century Roman settlement running alongside Watling Street, and he believes it to be the Roman town of Duralevum.
We knew already that there's Roman cemeteries to the north there, and so, we're looking at a settlement pattern already.
The Duro place name is an Old English name meaning fort or camp, and it's another reason Paul thinks there may have been a fort here. On a more practical level, Stuart's been looking at the possible shape of a Roman fort on our hilltop.
Although the stand-up plain cart shape is fairly dominant, there are a number of examples here where they're completely different. We've got a trapezoid shape there, one that almost looks like a cricket bat. And the Roman engineers were very practical people. If there is a fort here, they may have tailored it to suit the shape of the ridge, which points in that direction. So we may actually have something which is that kind of trapezoidal shape.
So Stuart reckons that if there is a fort here, it could be this shape. But so far, all our efforts have been focused on the western side, and now the feeling is that it's time to change our strategy. Stuart, you're looking restless.
I'm just a little bit concerned at the moment because we've got concentration on ditches on the west side.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever we've found, we've still only got ditches there. I think we need to broaden our horizons and demonstrate that we've got another side to this possible fort. I think we've got to sort of move over to the east and see what's happening over there.
The important thing is to demonstrate we have actually got an enclosure.
That's right, yeah.
I was hoping that Geophys might have better luck detecting the other Roman ditch Paul excavated on the eastern side of the site, but once again their equipment just isn't seeing it.
Yeah, what we need to know is if it carries on down there to form a second site to this enclosure.
I think you should just put a trench in on the basis of your alignments.
Let
us continue surveying.
Yeah, I think it's what we're going to have to do. I mean, we did it over there and we've got some results. So if we do the same tactic here, put a long trench in to cover where that ditch might go, and then it'll allow your picture to build up as well and see if it fits in between the trenches, won't it?
Our picture of nothing. I thought I'd say that before you did.
To add to our problems today, our team leader Neil has to leave us to attend an important meeting. But before he goes, I want to talk to him about my empty checklist. Should I be getting worried? I've got not one tick in any of these boxes.
No, but we've got the 2 coins, which are almost like half a tick, if you like.
Why? Why are these coins so significant? Why do they say military? They're just coins.
Well, they're coins that came over with the Roman army, and they circulated for about 20 years after the Roman invasion. Where you find them, they are almost exclusively associated with the Roman army. So they're very strong evidence that there was something happening here at the right time. I think the question is, have what we found in the trenches, does that relate to what those coins originally came from?
Yeah.
So we've got to keep going. I mean, there's certainly not time to panic.
He's right, because the ditch we've discovered under the earthwork bank could be part of the fort. It's big enough and in a good position on the brow of a hill.
Beautiful edge there. We're going to get a similar beautiful edge there. This thing's going to go right down, great big V-shaped thing.
Are you convinced that it's Roman, and does it look like a defensive
Absolutely.
ditch?
I mean, we got the Claudian coin out of there yesterday, in amongst masses of Roman material, so yeah, no doubt it's Roman.
Well, I think both Dan and I are hoping that the Roman ditch we've discovered here could be one of the 2 defensive ditches that you normally get around a Roman fort. The ditch Paul found would be the outer of the 2. But the mystery at the moment is that we can't find any continuation of Paul's ditch, either in Trench 1 or over here in Trench 3. Because of this, we're now reopening one of Paul's trenches to check the alignment. So why do you need Henry?
Well, that's what I want the little fella for. I mean, look, you see that pile of dirt right there?
Phil wants Henry to work out how much deeper we'll have to dig to get down to the same Roman level that Paul found, given the dumping of soil that's gone on in this area. Henry?
Yeah.
Did he call you the little fella? Shall we deck him?
Actually, there's not a lot in there.
At least we're not superannuated old hippies.
Very good point.
I think everyone's agreed that this is a pig of a site to get to grips with. Not just the landscaping, but also the changing geology makes it difficult to read. But we have to remember it is worth the trouble. Finding evidence of a Claudian fort here would be major news because so little's known about the Roman invasion of 43 AD.
What do the historians of the Roman period actually tell us about the invasion?
Well, our main source is Dio Cassius, a Greek who wrote about 160 years after the event. That's pretty well all we've got. It's a very interesting question because really there's only a couple of pages and it doesn't tell us any of the information that you or I or any other archaeologist or historian would be desperate to have, which is like exact geographical information for where they landed. All he tells us, for example, is that they came in 3 waves. I mean, he doesn't even tell us the number of troops. You'll often read in history books that it was 40 or 50,000 men. Well, that's based purely on working back from legions and soldiers that we knew were around here, probably the best part of a generation later, and a side reference that suggests there were roughly the same number of legionaries and auxiliaries involved in the conquest. So that's where the figure of 40,000 has come from, not from a Roman historian.
Where does that leave Sindale?
Well, you know, it's a key route across North Kent. I mean, they're going to have to end up controlling it. Remember that the coastline's very different at that period.
Well, the coastline would have been closer then, wouldn't it? Because
right.
the sea levels were higher.
Very important for the Roman supply bases to be close to the coast because they would move most of their bulk materials by sea. So this is a key road route and a key sea route. So Sindale must have played, or any fort along here, whether there's a fort here or whether there's a fort somewhere else, controlling this route would have been vital to the progress of the invasion as the men and materials start to be moved in. Again, just like the D-Day landings in 1944, you've got to get all that stuff in and control it.
We've just about re-excavated Paul's old trench, and we can actually see the bit of ditch he originally discovered. And now we've done this, of course, Phil announces he thinks he's finally found the continuation of it over here in Trench 1.
Whoa, what's that? Oh, it's our first bit of Paul.
But at least we can now check its alignment. So with Phil's trench in the distance and Paul's old trench in the middle, we can see why we haven't found it in Trench 3.
So if we line the two up, the ditch should come through.
It should just come here.
There, which explains why we didn't find it.
Absolutely.
In that trench we
stopped a metre and a half too short.
At long last, our diggers have got smiles on their faces. Is it just because the sun's come out, or have we actually got more evidence for our fort?
I think we're starting to get some more evidence now. The ditch up here in Trench 1 is resolving itself. It's a ditch. It's carrying on down. Where Phil is down there, we've got a ditch which is slightly curving in. It was confusing because it's right on the edge of an existing landscape feature. So you've already got a drop, and they're cutting the ditch into the edge of the drop to sort of accentuate it.
If you came to this cold and just saw the evidence that we've got in the ground now, would you think, looks to me like we've got a Roman fort?
I need more, I'm afraid. I need more of the circuit. We really need to get the profile of Phil's ditch to see if it's the same as the profile of Paul's ditch.
But at last we do seem to be getting somewhere. For the first time, I'm beginning to believe that there might be a Roman fort here. Oh look, the boats come right up to here even now.
That's right.
And this is only, what, about a mile away from our site?
It is. You always can't see this sea, can you? It's like a cloud just hanging over the edge of the water there.
Our little site is just a little black blob just there. If you actually add in the Roman coastline,
there's no doubt that the site occupied a prime position, and it's best appreciated on our 3D model.
General wetlands.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because you can see how visible it would have been approaching from the coast. It's a completely different perspective, isn't it?
There's a stream coming down this valley, and there still is a stream flowing through Faversham. There's a creek in there, and the vessels were able to get much, much closer to our site than they can at present.
So you'd have had an army marching through the countryside, and then along the coast you'd have had support coming from the Roman boats. Finding a gateway into the fort is high on my checklist, and the fact that the ditch Phil's discovered appears to be turning suggests we could have found it. Entrances to forts varied quite a bit. Some had curving ditches, others didn't. But most had an outer bank preventing attackers charging the gate. The current debate is about how we sort out what we've got.
I think we do need to extend the trench, at least 5 metres and possibly even further, to try and get that outer bank.
Well, all that level, all that stuff down there has been so heftily landscaped that any banks, I'm sure we're not going to find them.
I know you've been ignoring the geophysics up until now. I mean, if we look at what's in the trench and what we've got in our results now, Is that not what you're talking about, Corinza?
That looks absolutely perfect. Look, this is the sort of shape of the outer bit you'd have. It comes along like that, then curves out in that S shape, then starts up again after a gap. And that's exactly what you've got there, a long curving out in the S-shaped gap and starting up again. This is fantastic.
Well, Corinza sounds convinced, but the geophys still seems very foggy to me. Nevertheless, we're extending Trench 1 to find more of Phil's curving ditch. Thankfully, over in the eastern field, progress is much easier to understand.
Well, we haven't found any Roman ditches in this trench, and we haven't found very much in the way of Roman finds,
Despite
actually.
our hopes.
Well, yeah, there's
Much else.
nothing really that's definitely first century. But the thing I thought you might want to see, Phil, is these hobnails.
I wonder
Let
why
me
you'd
rinse.
ask me to bring these over. Yeah.
No, you see, it's a high maintenance world, you see. These are always falling
Look
out.
at that, those little rounded heads like that, and then just where they've been bent over.
But they don't have to be military.
No, you're right. They don't have to be military. The other thing is, and we've got to be careful about this, we know that loads of Roman graves have been found in the area. Putting a pair of shoes for the journey to the underworld in a grave is a commonplace thing for Romans to do, and what you get are the iron hobnails left behind.
Tell me about it, I've dug dozens of them.
This site's been a nightmare for geophys, but they've not given up yet.
Go ahead, Chris.
John, we just finished a block of resistance survey in the eastern field, and I think we've actually got some interesting results this time.
Oh,
That's
fantastic.
what I'm just saying to you.
At last, a glimmer of hope for geophys. It seems their latest results may have detected a huge ditch on this side of the site. One of our frustrations has been that we've only got little bits of a ditch around here, and that means that we've no idea what the size of the thing is or what shape it's in. But if we've got a piece around here, then that really is an important piece of the jigsaw defining the area. We could know whether there's a really good chance of there being a fort here or not, just from that, couldn't we?
We need to see it on the ground.
We need to see it on the ground. This has got to be a first. John nervously rushing in to see his own results.
I hope this is worth it.
Well, anything's worth it, isn't it? Look what we've got here. We've surveyed this huge area and we found this high resistance anomaly that's running along here. You can see in the plot. And it's, well, I mean, what is it? It's got to be.
It's got to be.
Show me where it is on the ground.
Well, all right, okay, on the ground. Well, it's approximately going around about here, Tony. Now, it's about that orientation. So, in fact, it should be just about clipping the edge of the trench if it goes through the trench. I don't know because we've not surveyed right up to the edge of the trench, and it's all becoming too much for us today, I think.
Well, I know what he means, although I think they'll have to wait until tomorrow to find out if they really have found evidence of the fort. But it's all part of the positive trend we've had going this afternoon, the feeling that we're starting to sort out the archaeology on this hill. In fact, I optimistically asked graphics to start working on a 3D model of the kind of fort gateway we might expect. And I reckon it's this that's put the kibosh on it, because now I'm told the gateway has disappeared. The devastating news is we couldn't find any more of Phil's curving ditch because it's been quarried away. And even after massively extending Trench 1, there was no trace of the other side of an entrance. As if this isn't bad enough, after extending Trench 3, we still couldn't find any continuation of Paul's Roman military ditch in this direction.
We're following the right lines of inquiry, even if we're not getting the answers.
Hello, Neil here.
Hi Neil, it's Tony. Are you still in your AGM? One thing's for sure, we're going to need our team leader back to try and sort it all out tomorrow. In our ditch, well, it goes halfway round that turn and then it just stops.
I think let's just assess what we've got. Perhaps have a drink.
Yeah.
Have a look at it after a drink, and we'll go at it tomorrow morning with a fresh pair of eyes.
Find us.
The mood's mixed, but maybe we can still solve the puzzle. Certainly Paul Wilkinson still believes there's a Roman fort here.
How do you know the military? How do you know the military?
This young man from English Heritage tells me.
We've got a couple of V-shaped ditches, but they're not continuous, and the discontinuities aren't gate-like. They're just stops.
Yeah. I mean, okay, we came here looking for a fort, and I mean, it's looking as though it's slipping away. That doesn't mean to say we got to give up on it.
Oh, no.
But equally, if we haven't got a fort, what the hell have we got?
Yeah.
And it's just as interesting to find out what the hell we have got.
Join us after the break, because I promise you that tomorrow we'll sort all this evidence out and find out one way or another exactly what's here. Day 3 and our last chance to try and get to grips with the archaeology on this ridge of higher ground, one of the most challenging sites I think we've ever tackled. We're testing the theory that there was once a Roman fort here, but as my blank checklist shows, the evidence is proving hard to find. Yesterday, I thought we'd established that we had a Roman military ditch stretching between these two trenches.
You grant then, we got a ditch coming to here, and then where the hell does it go?
I still think, I'm not convinced that the ditch in Trench 1 is Paul's ditch, just because it's cutting material that potentially is yielding later pottery. Therefore, that ditch could be 3rd century in that trench.
Yeah, but...
Definitely not the start to the day we were hoping for. Meanwhile, I'm driving across to the other side of the site, where we're looking for another of Paul's ditches that in theory joined up to encircle the hill like this. Carenza.
Hi there.
I don't see you actually leaping up and down with enthusiasm, so presumably you still haven't found the ditch.
No, this peg is on the point at which it should come through, given that those ranging poles are on the line of the ditch. And as you can see, looking in the trench, there's nothing in there at all.
The truth is that the whole site is a big puzzle without Geophys being able to detect the ditches. But our strategy of digging long exploratory trenches to locate the archaeology seems to be paying off, because we've unearthed something intriguing at this end of the trench, and we're widening to get a better look.
To me, the stratigraphy says...
But the current debate is, can we make sense of this site in the time we've got left? Neil's convinced that Phil's curving ditch found yesterday is cutting through 2nd and 3rd century layers and can't be the 1st century military ditch we're looking for.
So really, all we've got, going back a step now, is we're back to where Paul had it last year in his trench. I know this all sounds a bit like just chasing ditches, but I am tempted to say, let's go back between the two trenches again now, and let's see if we can find out where that ditch really goes, work from the known into the unknown. I mean, maybe it's
need to prove that it's a fort. Surely to goodness, you know, we
need to look at the archaeology of the site.
After 2 days, it doesn't look like we have got one. Are we going to spend the rest of the 3 days arguing about whether or not it is, or actually trying to come up with something constructive to say, well, it's not a fort, but well, this is what we think it could well be otherwise?
Look at the archaeology of the site and let it speak for it, yeah.
As we witnessed the other day with this plucky legionnaire, Roman soldiers did occasionally lose bits of kit, but we've seen nothing in the way of military finds, and the feeling now is that the ditches could belong to a Roman farm rather than a fort. Even the big impressive ditch we found under the earthwork bank could just be a property boundary, although Dan, who excavated it, needs convincing.
Well, it's still a big ditch, and it's still a deep ditch, and if it's linked with farming and landscape and field systems, for instance, I think it's just too big, and it's too clean.
It still looks a bit like a military ditch, I'll grant you, but it hasn't got the context. I mean, as you say, everything else is going now, and even the pottery from it had a wide date range, didn't it? I mean, it could be Claudian, but the range means that it could be Hadrianic again. And,
although Dan's big ditch might continue under the earthwork bank, it's not possible for us to get at it here in Trench 2, because we've discovered, would you believe, the remains of a 4th century Roman road, and any earlier evidence would be deep beneath it.
We've got metal surface, it's really nice. We've got a camber, it's coming much lower down here, it's rising up. We don't have many cobbles here, it may be ruck marks from transportation, and it's aligning in this direction.
Unearthing a Roman road coming off Watling Street may not be what I was hoping for, but it is in itself a significant discovery. Another bit for Paul to add to his growing picture of Duralevum, the 3rd and 4th century town he's been excavating here at Sindale. But the whole team are now convinced that there wasn't a Roman fort here, and it's time to break the news to Paul.
So I've got to say, I think we've given your ditch a good go, Paul, but I just don't think we've got the evidence that forms a continuous line to make a side of a fort.
It's a V-shaped ditch, but it doesn't have the other features. It's not continuous with, gates in the breaks.
A military ditch, Tony, has to go round something.
The theories that have been coming out and the kind of analysis of the archaeology that we've got so far really seems to me to rip to shreds your whole reason for getting us here in the first place, which was to establish whether there's a fort here. How are you feeling about that?
We can't keep going for detail of actually trying to find out which ditch is which ditch and how they all tie up. We've got to look at the wider picture.
The best use of our time now, it's felt, would be to dig at the top of the hill.
Picture of the site.
Excuse me being a bit sceptical, but that sounds to me like a very clever argument for saying, in desperation, we'll just sling in some random trenches for the next 8 hours.
Those ditches must have surrounded something, and we've got to find out what they surrounded. Now we're confident it's not a foot. The only way to find out is to look somewhere in the middle.
So we're going to excavate in the middle of the site to see if we can get any clue to what was going on here. Any information now about this hill will be useful. And the most promising news of the day has come from where we've been widening the trench on the far side of the site.
But we have really started to hit some major Roman levels here.
That's a bit of a big hole you got, Mars.
I'm afraid so, yes. We were hoping this morning it was going to be part of this great big ditch going across the site, but it's actually turning into, it's either a well or it's a pit or it's some kind of shaft.
So it's another ditch that isn't a ditch?
Another one, yes, exactly. It's going straight down and we haven't hit the bottom yet.
Anything in it?
That's about the best piece of pottery I've seen of this site. Just look at the decoration, it's really delicate. All those scrolls here. Do you see the little pair of birds on either side? You see? Little bird turning back there, another one over on this side. Hang on. These are all off the same pole. Do you see that? No, that goes on there. There's a bit missing there, and I bet you that's the one. Look, it must have been. There we are.
Oh no, we've lost a little bit in the middle.
People, look, the most interesting thing about the whole thing is the way it's been riveted together. Do you see the lead rivets that have been put through? And on the top bit here, there's a hole for a lead rivet that's been missing.
And what are they for?
Well, it seems incredible you could take such a flashy piece of decorated bond and put these socking great rivets through it, making it really ugly.
Yeah.
But actually, all the way, I think right up till the 20th century, you would still rivet vessels and you can make them watertight. So a valued vessel you'd look after like that, even though it looks incredibly ugly to us.
What sort of date's this?
Late 1st century, somewhere Flavian period. That's actually very good for us, but it's still not back to the invasion.
Well, that is by far the best find that we've had on this dig.
Well,
anything else?
wait, there's a bone pin there.
Oh, yes. Sometimes you tell me something's a bone pin and it just looks like a bit of old mank to me, but that's beautiful, isn't it?
Can you imagine trying to make that without breaking it? So you did it.
And then we've got a ring there as well. I don't know what you think of that guy.
Hexagonal. Sorry, it's octagonal, isn't it? Yeah. It's either silver or it's silvered bronze to look like silver.
The other thing that's really interesting we haven't had before so far is this.
That's fantastic, because all we've had across here are bits of what we think might be fields, those gullies and ditches, that sort of thing, building. This is part of a curved roof tile called an imbrex, laid out in a row like that with the flat roof tiles called tegulae on either side. An absolutely Roman form.
So we've got roof tile, we've got a roof, we've got a building. What do you think we've got, guys? This looking like a quite wealthy farmhouse at the end of the 2nd century?
I think that's a real possibility. With that kind of thing, that's a curved roof tile. You'd have a whole row of those up the middle of the roof and the flat tiles underneath on either side. Absolutely a Roman type. I think you've got another piece there with a fingerprint in it.
We've got lots of it coming up.
Right, then that tells me that there's probably a structure in the vicinity, a Roman building, and that's the first evidence we've had for that.
What's so reassuring to me is that we've had these little scatters of Roman evidence up till now, but we've never really had a focus for anywhere where actually real tangible things might have been going on.
That's right.
So whatever this is, the new challenge is to try and make sense of it in the time we've got left. But it seems we're talking Roman farm rather than fort, and that apparently is why the geophysics didn't work.
OK, let me try and explain. If we look at the magnetics, if you've got a ditch, and that's part of a fort, inside the fort, you'll have lots of activity, burning, rubbish pits and so on. When the fort goes out of use, the burnt material goes into the ditch fill. When we walk over with the magnetics, we get a strong signal. If that ditch is actually just a field boundary, there's no fort, then you don't have the burning, you don't have the rubbish. So the fill that goes into the ditch, it's sterile. When we walk over, no signal. That's the magnetics. The resistance, look at the same ditch. Normally the fill's waterlogged, so when we go over, the currents pass through easily, we get a low signal. If that ditch is on a slope, then the water drains away down the slope. So when we walk over, no signal.
So that's 2 reasons. Any more?
How long you got?
Geophys can take some consolation from the fact that our evaluation trenches have now established that there wasn't any Roman archaeology to be detected on top of the hill. But there is one last chance for Geophys. Given that we're now finding evidence of Roman settlement in this field, they've nervously suggested that we check out the one large anomaly they detected close by.
So what's this trench in aid of then, John?
Look, that's what Chris got yesterday. This huge anomaly running through there. High resistance.
So where's our trench?
Trench is going right across there.
Fortunately, as we haven't got a lot of time, this mystery doesn't take long to resolve.
So, a Roman villa, eh?
Where did that come from?
Well, I thought that this, somebody suggested that maybe this was going to be the wing of a Roman villa.
Who? You've answered the question.
It's gravel.
Yeah.
But it's where we said it was going to be, Phil, so that's all that matters.
Would you believe it? It's that parkland landscape again.
And this is probably the worst geophysical site we've been on, and we want to go home.
Don't rush away, you could sell the aggregate rights.
If only back in the 18th century they'd known that creating a park here would cause so many problems. But later landscaping isn't the reason we've had to dig deeply here. This, we've now established, is a Roman well stuffed with clues about daily life here in the 1st to 4th century. Miles, this is my favourite bit of the site. You've got more finds.
Yes. It's a 3rd century coin. See that little radiate crown on the head?
Yeah.
Late 3rd century.
Anything else?
Yeah, these are just coming up
right.
in and around the area of the shaft.
Right, bit of metal wear. That's very heavy, isn't it? Feel like?
Whatever is that?
Well, I think it might be a weight off a steel yard. You know those olden day balancers where you'd have a shaft with weights hanging off it on a hook?
Oh,
you
yeah,
just slide
yeah,
it on.
yeah.
It's so heavy that must be its function. It's certainly got a suspension hole.
And this?
Right. Red wear. Do you see the finger marks there for the decoration around the frill? There's a place over in Hertfordshire called Much Haddam, which produced quite a distinctive sort of red pottery, some of which had faces on the front, dating to the 4th century, some a little bit earlier. But again, you know, you've got a complete mishmash, haven't you, of dates all the way through the period?
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly 3rd and 4th century, but there's little sort of bits of 1st.
Have you got different levels in it, or is it just all mixed up?
The actual shaft is just one homogeneous fill going right the way down.
So somebody's gone around bulldozing all the rubbish off the surface here, haven't they? At one point dumping it in, yeah.
So in the end, although Victor enjoyed his chance to draw the Roman invasion of 43 AD, we didn't find any evidence of military activity at Sindale. The evidence we unearthed points more to a picture like this, of a 2nd to 4th century Romano-British farming settlement that was most likely reusing ditches that had been open at the time of the invasion and part of an Iron Age landscape. Or at least that's the latest theory for consideration.
I think that's going a bit beyond the evidence, really, Guy, you know. I mean, in the end, we've got a series of ditches, haven't we?
None of which have the same fill as each other. None of
Put any bunch of archaeologists together and they'll end up arguing theories. But there's one thing that we're all agreed on, that we've scotched the 150-year-old idea that there was once a Roman fort on this hill. Which means, of course, that the first Roman fort ever built in Britain is still out there somewhere, just waiting to be found.